Royal Guard Story. Part 1. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Prince William made his way through the ornate corridors. It was supposed to be a routine day filled with ceremonial duties and meetings with foreign dignitaries. The Prince of Wales had always prided himself on maintaining the highest standards within the royal household, believing that every person representing the crown should embody dignity, respect, and unwavering professionalism. As he approached the main entrance, Prince William noticed something that made his blood run cold. Royal Guard James Morrison, a man who had served the palace for nearly 8 years, was engaged in what could only be described as highly inappropriate behavior. Morrison was not only using his mobile phone while on duty, but he was also speaking in a loud, crude manner that could be heard echoing through the grand hallway. The conversation Morrison was having was shocking beyond belief. He was bragging to someone on the other end about his access to the royal family, making inappropriate comments about the female staff members, and worst of all, sharing confidential information about the palace's security protocols. His voice carried a tone of arrogance and complete disregard for the sacred trust that had been placed in him. Prince William stopped in his tracks, his face turning pale with a mixture of anger and disbelief. This was not just a simple breach of protocol. This was a complete betrayal of everything the royal institution stood for. The prince had witnessed many things during his years in the public eye, but nothing had prepared him for this level of disrespect from someone who was supposed to be protecting his family. What made the situation even more disturbing was that Morrison seemed completely oblivious to the fact that he was being observed. He continued his phone conversation, laughing loudly at his own crude jokes and making comments that would have been inappropriate in any workplace, let alone within the walls of the most important royal residence in the United Kingdom. Prince William's mind raced as he considered the implications of what he was witnessing. This guard had access to sensitive areas of the palace, knew the family's daily routines, and was clearly willing to share confidential information with outsiders. The security breach was enormous, but the personal disrespect cut even deeper. The prince had always tried to maintain a cordial relationship with the palace staff, understanding that they were all part of one extended team working to serve the crown and the British people. He had made efforts to learn names, ask about families, and show appreciation for the hard work that everyone contributed. To see that trust and respect being thrown back in his face was almost unbearable. As Morrison continued his phone conversation, he began making particularly offensive comments about Princess Catherine, discussing her daily routines, and making inappropriate observations about her appearance and behavior. This crossed a line that Prince William simply could not ignore. His wife's privacy and dignity were being violated by someone who was paid to protect the royal family. The prince took a deep breath and made a decision that would reverberate throughout the entire palace staff. He would not let this slide. He would not handle it quietly through proper channels, and he would not give Morrison a chance to explain or apologize. Some actions were simply unforgivable, and this was one of them. Prince William straightened his shoulders and began walking directly toward the unsuspecting guard. His footsteps echoed purposefully through the hallway, but Morrison was still too engrossed in his inappropriate conversation to notice the approaching storm. The prince's jaw was set with determination, and his eyes blazed with a righteous anger that few people had ever seen. The other staff members in the vicinity began to sense that something significant was about to happen. Housekeepers paused in their duties, other guards glanced nervously in the direction of the approaching confrontation, and even the usually bustling atmosphere of the palace seemed to quiet in anticipation of what was to come. Prince William was known for his measured responses and diplomatic approach to conflicts, but this situation had pushed him beyond his usual calm demeanor. The combination of security concerns, personal disrespect, and violation of his family's privacy had created a perfect storm of royal fury that was about to be unleashed. As he drew closer to Morrison, Prince William could hear even more disturbing details of the guard's conversation. Morrison was not only sharing confidential information, but was also making plans to meet with unauthorized individuals and discussing ways to potentially profit from his position within the palace. This was not just misconduct. It was potentially criminal behavior that threatened the safety and security of the entire royal family. The prince realized that this moment would define not only Morrison's future, but would also send a clear message to every person working within the palace walls about what would and would not be tolerated. The decision he was about to make would be swift, decisive, and absolutely final. Royal Guard Story. Part 2. Prince William's footsteps grew louder and more deliberate as he approached the oblivious Royal Guard Morrison. The prince's presence seemed to fill the grand hallway with an electric tension that made every nearby staff member freeze in their tracks. When he was just a few feet away from Morrison, Prince William cleared his throat with authority. The sound cut through Morrison's crude laughter like a knife through silk. The guard spun around, his phone still pressed to his ear, and his face immediately drained of all color when he saw who was standing before him. The arrogant smirk that had been plastered across his face disappeared instantly, replaced by a look of pure terror and realization of what he had been caught doing. "End that call immediately," Prince William commanded, his voice carrying a cold authority that left no room for argument. Morrison fumbled with his phone, stammering apologies to whoever was on the other end before quickly hanging up. His hands were visibly shaking as he tried to compose himself and stand at attention. "Your Royal Highness, I can explain," Morrison began, his voice cracking with nervousness. But Prince William raised his hand to silence him before he could continue, with what would undoubtedly be a series of lies and excuses. "There is absolutely nothing you could say that would make what I just witnessed acceptable," the prince stated firmly. His voice was controlled but filled with an unmistakable fury that seemed to make the very air around them vibrate with tension. "You have violated every oath you took when you accepted this position." Morrison's eyes darted around desperately, looking for some escape route or perhaps hoping that this was all some terrible nightmare from which he would soon wake up. But the stern faces of his fellow guards and staff members told him that this was very real, and his career was about to come to a devastating end. Prince William continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "You have shared confidential information about palace security, made inappropriate comments about members of my family, and shown complete disregard for the trust that has been placed in you. Your behavior is not only unprofessional but potentially dangerous to everyone who lives and works here." The other guards in the vicinity had now stopped all pretense of continuing their duties and were watching the unprecedented scene unfold before their eyes. Never before had any of them witnessed a member of the royal family directly confronting a staff member in such a public manner. The gravity of Morrison's misconduct was becoming clear to everyone present. Morrison attempted once more to speak. "Sir, if you would just let me explain the context of that conversation." But Prince William's expression grew even more severe, and he stepped closer to the disgraced guard. "The context?" Prince William's voice rose slightly, though he maintained his regal composure. "The context is that you were discussing my wife's private routines with unauthorized individuals. The context is that you were sharing security protocols that could endanger my children. The context is that you have betrayed every principle that this institution stands for." The prince paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in not just to Morrison, but to every person within earshot. This was clearly meant to be a lesson that would be remembered and discussed throughout the palace for years to come. "I have heard enough to know that you are not fit to wear that uniform or represent this crown for even one more minute," Prince William declared with finality. "You are hereby relieved of your duties effective immediately. Remove your uniform, surrender your credentials, and vacate these premises within the hour." Morrison's face turned ashen as the full impact of what was happening hit him. He had not only lost his job but had been publicly humiliated by a future king. The career he had built over 8 years was destroyed in a matter of minutes, and everyone he worked with had witnessed his spectacular downfall. "But sir, I have a family to support, bills to pay," Morrison pleaded desperately. "Surely there must be some other way to handle this situation, perhaps a suspension or a transfer to different duties." Prince William's expression remained unmoved by the guard's attempts at garnering sympathy. "You should have considered your family's well-being before you chose to betray the trust placed in you. Your actions have consequences, and those consequences are entirely of your own making." The prince then turned to address the other guards and staff members who had gathered to witness the confrontation. His voice carried clearly through the hallway as he made sure his message was understood by everyone present. "Let this serve as a reminder to all of you that service to the crown is not just a job, but a sacred duty that requires the highest standards of integrity, loyalty, and discretion. Anyone who believes they can abuse their position or treat their responsibilities lightly will find themselves facing similar consequences. As Prince William finished speaking, the head of palace security arrived, having been alerted to the commotion. The prince turned to him with clear instructions that left no room for interpretation or delay. Royal Guard Story Part 3. The head of palace security. Commander Richards approached the scene with measured steps, his experienced eyes quickly assessing the unprecedented situation unfolding before him. He had served in this role for over 15 years and had never witnessed a member of the royal family directly dismissing a staff member in such a public manner. The gravity of whatever Morrison had done was immediately clear from Prince William's demeanor and the stunned expressions on everyone's faces. Commander Richards. Prince William addressed him with crisp authority. Please escort Mr. Morrison to collect his personal belongings and ensure his immediate departure from the premises. He is to surrender all credentials, access cards, and any palace property in his possession. I want a complete security review conducted within the next 24 hours. Commander Richards nodded grimly, understanding the serious implications of the prince's orders. Of course, Your Royal Highness. I'll also need to conduct a full investigation into any potential security breaches and review all of Morrison's recent activities and communications. Morrison stood trembling, still struggling to comprehend how quickly his world had collapsed around him. The other guards watched in silence as their former colleague was about to be escorted away in disgrace. The atmosphere was thick with tension and disbelief at what they had all witnessed. Please also arrange for immediate replacement coverage for Morrison's scheduled duties. Prince William continued, his voice maintaining its authoritative tone. I want no gaps in our security protocols, and I want all staff reminded of their confidentiality agreements and professional obligations. As Commander Richards began to approach Morrison, the disgraced guard made one final desperate attempt to salvage his situation. Your Royal Highness, please, I beg of you to reconsider. I've served this palace faithfully for 8 years. Surely one mistake shouldn't end my entire career. I have a mortgage, children in school, a wife who depends on my income. The pleading in Morrison's voice was palpable, and several of the watching staff members shifted uncomfortably as they witnessed a man's life falling apart before their eyes. However, Prince William remained unmoved by the emotional appeal. One mistake? The prince's voice carried a note of incredulity. What I witnessed was not a single mistake, but a pattern of behavior that demonstrates a fundamental lack of respect for this institution, my family, and the trust placed in you. You were sharing confidential security information, making inappropriate comments about my wife, and planning unauthorized meetings. These are not minor errors in judgment. They are serious breaches that could have put lives at risk. Prince William paused, his gaze sweeping across the gathered staff members before returning to Morrison. Moreover, your attempt to minimize your actions shows that you still don't understand the severity of what you've done. That alone confirms that dismissing you is the correct decision. Commander Richards stepped forward and placed a firm but not unkind hand on Morrison's shoulder. Come along, Morrison. Let's handle this with whatever dignity we can salvage from this situation. His voice carried years of experience dealing with difficult personnel matters, though nothing quite like this. As Morrison was led away, his shoulders slumped in defeat, the reality of his situation finally beginning to sink in completely. The other guards and staff members watched in solemn silence, many of them reflecting on their own behavior and whether they had ever crossed any lines they shouldn't have. Prince William turned to address the remaining staff members, his voice now carrying a tone of leadership and guidance rather than anger. I want everyone to understand that what you witnessed here today was not about punishment for the sake of punishment. It was about protecting the integrity of our institution and the safety of everyone who works within these walls. He continued, each of you has been entrusted with responsibilities that go far beyond your job descriptions. You are guardians of tradition, protectors of privacy, and representatives of the crown. The British people trust us to maintain the highest standards, and we cannot allow that trust to be broken. The prince's words carried weight and purpose, and it was clear that he was using this moment as a teaching opportunity for the entire staff. This was not just about one guard's misconduct. It was about setting the tone for how the palace would operate under his future leadership. However, I also want you to know that I value each of you and the work you do, Prince William added, his tone softening slightly. Those who serve with honor, integrity, and dedication will always have my respect and support. But those who betray that trust will face the consequences of their choices. As the prince finished speaking, the staff members began to disperse. Many of them engaged in quiet conversations about what they had witnessed. The story would spread throughout the palace within hours, serving as a powerful reminder of the standards expected from everyone who served the royal family. Commander Richards returned, after escorting Morrison from the building, carrying a bag of surrendered credentials and access cards. The departure has been completed, Your Royal Highness. Morrison has been escorted off the premises and all his access has been revoked. I'll have a full security review completed by tomorrow morning. Prince William nodded his approval, but it was clear that his mind was already moving beyond this immediate crisis to the broader implications and necessary next steps. Royal Guard Story, Part 4. Within hours of Morrison's dramatic dismissal, news of the incident began spreading through the palace like wildfire. Staff members whispered in hushed tones during their breaks, sharing their accounts of what they had witnessed and speculating about the potential consequences for palace operations. The unprecedented nature of Prince William's direct intervention had created a buzz of conversation that reached every corner of the royal residence. Princess Catherine was among the first family members to learn of the morning's events when Prince William found her in the private family quarters. Her face showed a mixture of concern and disappointment as he recounted Morrison's inappropriate comments and security breaches involving her personal routines. I can't believe someone we trusted with our safety would violate our privacy in such a way, she said, her voice reflecting both hurt and anger, and to think he had access to information about the children's schedules and activities. It's terrifying to consider what could have happened if this behavior had continued. Prince William nodded grimly, placing a reassuring hand on his wife's shoulder. That's exactly why I couldn't allow it to continue for even one more day. The security implications alone were staggering, but the personal violations were equally unacceptable. No family should have to worry about their private moments being discussed and shared by the very people paid to protect them. Meanwhile, in the staff quarters, the conversation centered around the swiftness and finality of Morrison's dismissal. Many of the guards and household staff found themselves reflecting on their own conduct and wondering if they had ever said or done anything that might be considered inappropriate. Sarah Mitchell, a longtime housekeeper, spoke quietly to her colleague during their lunch break. In all my 20 years working here, I've never seen anything like what happened this morning. His Royal Highness was angrier than I've ever seen him, but also completely justified. Morrison crossed lines that should never be crossed. Her colleague, Maria Santos, nodded in agreement. It makes me think about how careful we all need to be. We're not just employees here. We're trusted with intimate details of the royal family's lives. That trust is sacred, and Morrison threw it away for what? Some crude jokes and gossip? The impact of the morning's events extended beyond just the palace staff. Commander Richards had immediately initiated a comprehensive security review, as requested by Prince William. This involved examining Morrison's access logs, reviewing security footage, and conducting interviews with other staff members to determine if anyone else had been involved in inappropriate behavior or information sharing. During one of these interviews, another guard, Thomas Walker, revealed disturbing information that made the situation even more serious than initially thought. Morrison had been pressuring junior staff members to share gossip about the royal family, claiming that it was all harmless fun and that everyone did it. He told me that sharing stories about the royals was just part of the job, Walker explained to Commander Richards. He said that as long as we didn't talk to reporters, it didn't matter what we discussed among ourselves. I never felt comfortable with it, but I didn't want to be seen as a troublemaker. This revelation prompted Commander Richards to expand his investigation and conduct mandatory refresher training, sessions on confidentiality and professional conduct for all palace staff. The sessions would cover not just what information could and couldn't be shared, but also the reasoning behind these strict protocols. As word of Morrison's dismissal began to reach contacts outside the palace, several individuals who had been receiving unauthorized information from him started to panic. One such person was Marcus Thompson, a freelance journalist who had been paying Morrison small amounts of money for tips about the royal family's activities. Thompson immediately destroyed his phone records and notes, fearing that the palace investigation might eventually lead back to him. He knew that receiving information from palace staff, even if not officially classified, could result in serious legal consequences and would certainly end his career in journalism. Back at the palace, Prince William called a meeting with his senior staff to discuss the broader implications of the morning's events and how to prevent similar situations in the future. The meeting included Commander Richards, the palace's human resources director, and the head of communications. Today's incident has highlighted some serious gaps in our security culture, Prince William began, his tone serious but measured. We need to understand how someone like Morrison was able to operate for so long without being detected or reported by his colleagues. The human resources director, Elizabeth Crawford, spoke up with obvious concern. Your Royal Highness, our background checks and security clearances are thorough, but they can't predict how someone's character might change over time or how they might be influenced by outside pressures. That's exactly why we need better ongoing monitoring and a culture where staff feel comfortable reporting inappropriate behavior. Prince William responded. No one should feel that they have to tolerate or ignore misconduct because they're afraid of being seen as disloyal or causing trouble. Commander Richards added his perspective from the security standpoint. We also need to review our information sharing protocols and ensure that staff members only have access to the information they absolutely need to perform their duties. Morrison's position gave him access to far more sensitive information than was necessary for his role. The conversation continued for over an hour, with each participant contributing ideas for strengthening both security protocols and workplace culture. It was clear that Morrison's dismissal, while dramatic and necessary, was just the beginning of a comprehensive overhaul of palace operations. Royal Guard Story, Part 5. 3 days after Morrison's dismissal, the palace was still buzzing with the aftershocks of the incident. Commander Richards had completed his initial security review and requested an urgent meeting with Prince William to discuss his findings. What he had discovered was far more troubling than anyone had initially imagined. Your Royal Highness, Commander Richards began as he entered Prince William's private office, his expression grave. The investigation has revealed that Morrison's misconduct was more extensive and systematic than we first believed. We've uncovered evidence that he had been sharing information for several months, possibly longer. Prince William leaned forward in his chair, his concern evident. How extensive are we talking about? And do we know who was receiving this information? Commander Richards opened his tablet and began reviewing his notes. We found records of multiple phone calls and text messages to at least 6 different individuals outside the palace. Some appear to be journalists. Others seem to be friends or acquaintances who were paying him small amounts of money for gossip and inside information. The prince's jaw tightened as he processed this information. This is even worse than I thought. We're not just dealing with poor judgment or casual indiscretion. This was essentially a deliberate intelligence operation running right under our noses. There's more, sir, Commander Richards continued. We've also discovered that Morrison had been using his access to restricted areas to take photographs with his personal phone. We found dozens of images on his device showing private family areas, security equipment, and even some photos that appear to have been taken during private family moments when he thought no one was watching. Prince William stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the palace grounds. The violation felt even more personal and disturbing than he had initially realized. This wasn't just about sharing gossip. This was about systematic invasion of his family's privacy and potentially compromising their security. Have any of these photographs been shared with outside parties? The prince asked, turning back to face Commander Richards. We're still investigating that aspect, but we found evidence that at least some images were sent via encrypted messaging apps to unknown recipients. Our technology team is working to trace these communications, but it's a complex process. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door, and Princess Catherine entered the office. She had requested to be included in this briefing, given that much of Morrison's inappropriate behavior had involved her and their children. I've just finished speaking with our legal team, she announced, her voice carrying a steel resolve that those close to her rarely witnessed. They've advised that we have grounds for both civil and criminal prosecution. Morrison's actions constitute multiple violations of the Official Secrets Act, breach of contract, and potentially stalking and harassment charges. Prince William nodded approvingly at his wife's proactive approach. I want to pursue every available legal option. This behavior cannot be allowed to stand without serious consequences, not just for Morrison, but as a deterrent to anyone else who might consider similar actions. Commander Richards cleared his throat before adding another disturbing element to the discussion. There's one more thing you both need to know. During our investigation, we discovered that Morrison had been attempting to recruit other staff members into sharing information. He offered money and suggested that everyone does it, and that the royal family would never find out. Princess Catherine's expression hardened even further. How many others were involved? We've identified 3 staff members who received these approaches, Commander Richards replied. Fortunately, all 3 reported feeling uncomfortable and declined to participate. However, this suggests that Morrison saw his activities as potentially expandable into a larger network. The implications of this revelation were staggering. If Morrison's recruitment efforts had been successful, the palace could have been dealing with a significant security breach involving multiple staff members over an extended period. I want all 3 of those staff members commended for their integrity, Prince William stated firmly. They should be recognized for doing the right thing and reporting inappropriate approaches. We need to encourage that kind of ethical behavior, Princess Catherine added. We also need to make sure they don't face any retaliation or suspicion from other staff members. Their decision to report Morrison's approaches may have prevented a much more serious situation. Commander Richards made notes on his tablet before continuing with his report. We've also discovered that Morrison had been keeping detailed notes about family routines, visitor schedules, and security protocols. These notes were found in his personal locker and appear to have been compiled over several months. Prince William returned to his desk and sat down heavily, the weight of the security breach becoming more apparent with each new revelation. This level of systematic information gathering goes far beyond simple gossip or casual indiscretion. This was intelligence collection, plain and simple. Our legal team believes this evidence significantly strengthens any criminal case against Morrison, Princess Catherine added. The systematic nature of his activities and the attempted recruitment of other staff members demonstrates clear intent and premeditation. Commander Richards nodded in agreement. We're coordinating with Scotland Yard's specialist units that handle cases involving national security and royal protection. They'll be taking the lead on the criminal investigation while we continue our internal security review. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with detailed discussions about improving security protocols, staff training, and background check procedures. By the time they finished, it was clear that Morrison's dismissal had uncovered what could have developed into a serious ongoing threat to the royal family's security and privacy. As Commander Richards prepared to leave, Prince William made one final request. I want a complete briefing prepared for my father and the other senior members of the family. They need to understand the full scope of what we've discovered and the steps we're taking to prevent anything like this from happening again. Royal Guard Story, Part 6-2. Weeks after the Morrison incident, the royal family gathered for their regular security briefing. But this meeting would be unlike any they had experienced before. King Charles, Prince William, Princess Catherine, and other senior royals sat around the polished conference table as Commander Richards presented the final results of the comprehensive investigation that had shaken the very foundations of palace security. Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, Commander Richards began, his tone reflecting the gravity of what he was about to reveal. The investigation into Morrison's activities has uncovered what can only be described as the most serious security breach in modern palace history. King Charles leaned forward, his expression serious but composed. Please proceed with the full details, Commander. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Commander Richards opened a thick folder containing his final report. Morrison had been systematically collecting and selling information about the royal family for over 18 months. We've traced payments totaling more than £15,000 from various sources, including tabloid journalists, freelance photographers, and what appear to be foreign intelligence operatives. The room fell silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. Princess Catherine was the first to speak, her voice tight with controlled anger. Foreign intelligence operatives? Are you saying that sensitive information about our family was potentially shared with hostile foreign governments? That's exactly what we're saying, Your Royal Highness, Commander Richards confirmed. We've found evidence of communications with individuals who have been flagged by MI5 as persons of interest in relation to foreign intelligence-gathering activities. Prince William's face had grown increasingly grim as the briefing continued. His decision to fire Morrison on the spot, which some had initially considered harsh, was now looking like it may have prevented an even more catastrophic security disaster. The systematic nature of Morrison's activities was truly remarkable in its scope and audacity. Commander Richards continued. He had created detailed files on each family member's daily routines, health information that he overheard or observed, relationship dynamics, and even financial discussions that he managed to eavesdrop on during his duties. King Charles spoke with quiet authority. What steps are being taken to ensure that this information cannot be used against us or the monarchy? We're working closely with MI5 Scotland Yard and International Intelligence Services to track down everyone who received information from Morrison, Commander Richards replied. Several arrests have already been made, including 2 journalists who were paying him for exclusive stories and 1 individual who appears to have been acting as an intermediary for foreign interests. Princess Catherine asked the question that was on everyone's mind. How did he manage to operate for so long without being detected? Surely there should have been safeguards in place to prevent this kind of systematic breach. Commander Richards looked uncomfortable as he addressed this crucial point. Your Royal Highness, our investigation has revealed several systemic failures in our security culture and protocols. Morrison was able to exploit gaps in our monitoring systems, take advantage of the trust placed in him, and operate in areas where oversight was insufficient. Prince William spoke up, his voice carrying both frustration and determination. This is exactly why I felt compelled to act immediately when I witnessed his behavior. My instincts told me that what I was seeing was just the tip of a much larger problem, and unfortunately, those instincts proved correct. King Charles nodded approvingly at his son's decisive action. Your immediate response likely prevented this situation from becoming even worse than it already was. The question now is what we do moving forward to ensure nothing like this can happen again, Commander. Richards was prepared for this question and began outlining the comprehensive reforms that were being implemented. We're instituting a complete overhaul of our security protocols, including regular psychological evaluations for all staff, random monitoring of communications, restricted access policies that limit information sharing, and a new anonymous reporting system that encourages staff to report suspicious behavior. The meeting continued for over 2 hours, with detailed discussions about each aspect of the new security measures. The royal family asked probing questions about implementation timelines, potential weaknesses in the new systems, and how to maintain necessary trust with loyal staff members while preventing future breaches. Perhaps most significantly, Prince William announced that he would be taking a more active role in palace security operations. This experience has taught me that we cannot simply delegate the responsibility for our family's safety and privacy to others without maintaining active oversight ourselves. As the meeting concluded, news began to break in the media about Morrison's arrest and the charges being filed against him. The palace's communications team had carefully crafted statements that acknowledged the security breach while emphasizing the swift action taken to address it and the comprehensive reforms being implemented. Morrison, meanwhile, was facing serious criminal charges that could result in several years in prison. His attempts to claim that he was just sharing harmless gossip had been completely undermined by the evidence of systematic information gathering and the involvement of foreign intelligence operatives. The incident became a defining moment for Prince William's approach to leadership and security. Staff throughout the palace spoke in hushed tones about the day they witnessed a future king make a split-second decision that potentially saved the monarchy from a devastating scandal. In the months that followed, the new security protocols and cultural changes implemented as a result of the Morrison incident would become a model for royal households around the world. The swift, decisive action taken by Prince William was studied by security experts as an example of how leadership during a crisis could prevent a bad situation from becoming a catastrophic one. The palace staff, rather than being demoralized by the incident, found themselves working in an environment with clearer expectations, better support systems, and renewed sense of purpose. The 3 staff members who had reported Morrison's recruitment attempts were quietly honored and became examples of the integrity and loyalty that the royal family valued above all else. Years later, when royal historians looked back on this period, they would mark Prince William's firing of Royal Guard Morrison as a turning point that demonstrated his readiness for the responsibilities of kingship and his unwavering commitment to protecting both his family and the institution of the monarchy.